Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Torah with your host, Rabbi Anibal. It's so great to be together once again, studying Torah, connecting to Judaism, getting closer to God. It's a great thing. It's a great feeling. So thank you so much for being there. Thank you for tuning in this afternoon. The Thursday afternoon is 12:05 p.m. Central Time. We are going live. But just a quick reminder that the class is going to be rebroadcasted tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. So if you miss any part of the class, you have to leave in the middle. Don't worry, you can still catch the repeat tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. And of course, all the classes also stay in our YouTube channel. So if you're a little bit more tech savvy, you can go to our YouTube channel and search for actually any class or any stream from Congregation Acharei Mot-Kedoshim that you would like to repeat. It's a great thing, right? I know we stream also on Facebook, but it's more difficult to search on Facebook. It's more difficult to search. Let's see who's here. The Grossmans are here. Welcome. Amparo Goldman is here as well. Welcome to the class. Donna Alden Bogdan. Welcome. Shalom. Rocky Pollack is here. Welcome, Judge Rocky Pollack. And Jerome Fomin. And if there is anybody else, please say hello. It's nice to know who is on the other side. If you have access to the chat, actually, I encourage you to use it all along the class. That's our way to communicate, so I can read your messages and I can answer you. That's a great thing to have. Well, today we are going to study the weekly parsha, Acharei Mot-Kedoshim, but we are going to focus more on the second part, on Kedoshim, because there is a very interesting concept. And let me tell you a little bit of the background of the inspiration for this class, okay? I am the one who teaches choosing Judaism at Congregation Acharei Mot-Kedoshim. I am the director of the course. Choosing Judaism is also known as conversion classes. That's the way we used to call it. Now we call it Choosing Judaism because it's not just for people who would like to convert to Judaism. There are many people that they are already Jewish and they also take the class because they want to expand on their Jewish knowledge and etc. So we changed the name. But it's more important than the name is for you to understand the principle here. Okay. Well, we just finished the cycle. We studied together for 25 weeks, different topics about Judaism. I have a wonderful group of people that they were very curious. They had great questions. We had amazing time studying together also. And the interesting thing is we just finished last week. And this week's Parsha, Acharei Mot-Kedoshim, it brings back the concept or the topic of the convert. Or proselyte, I believe usually the translation. But we are going to see that in the Torah, the concept of a convert, somebody who was not born Jewish and wants to become Jewish, is not regulated. There is nothing in the Torah that it says what we have to do if somebody wants to become Jewish, right? And we are going to see how it went from that very vague, those very vague texts in the Torah to a more formal guideline provided eventually by the rabbis, and why that was necessary. Okay? And then, hopefully, if we have time towards the end of the class, I want to bring another verse that is also connected to what, according to the rabbis, should be taught to people who would like to join the Jewish people, right? So stay tuned because those are the topics for today's class. And again, this is more towards the end of Parsha Kedoshim, but it's still part of the weekly Parsha. So it's interesting. We are going to study. The other thing that we should say, and I hope you had an opportunity to celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut yesterday. I had a great time going to the Asper campus here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, to celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut with the whole community. It was packed. And the celebration started at 4, and I think we didn't leave there until like almost 9:45 p.m. We had the fireworks, and then there was music. It was amazing. And then this morning, I could barely wake up, but it was worth it. It was worth every second that I spent there. I went with my son. He's 9 years old, and I was also in charge of all his friends. So they make me run from 4 to 9:45. Anyway, I guess it keeps me young, running after the kids, but we had the opportunity to celebrate Israel. Israel became, the modern state of Israel became 75 years old, which is amazing. It's a miracle by itself. The fact that we have Israel and we are able to celebrate Israel. And it's something that if you miss this year, hopefully you will have an opportunity next year to experience, because it's an amazing thing to do. And I also wanted to mention the topic of Israel, because the whole concept of conversion to Judaism is also deeply related or connected to Israel. And you will see why in a minute. Okay? So, with that little introduction, let's begin with the class. Welcome, Maggie. Maggie Harris is here with us. Shalom and welcome to the class. Let's go to the topic. Let's go to the text that I have for you. So let me remove that QR code so we can read it all. Okay, here we have it. Yeah. Okay, it says, Ki yagur itecha ger be'artzechem lo tonu oto. When a proselyte dwells among you in your land, do not taunt him. So by the way, proselyte, convert, the interesting thing is that the word that the Torah uses here is not proselyte, is not convert, is ger. Ger. Okay? Ger is singular, plural will be gerim. And then in the modern Hebrew, when somebody wants to convert to Judaism, he or she goes through a process of geirut. This is the same word. And it becomes, when it becomes like a Jew by choice, it becomes a ger tzedek. Same word, ger tzedek, which means righteous, ger. But what exactly is ger? Ger was somebody who was not born in the land of Israel, and now for different circumstances moved into the land of Israel. And we are talking about here in biblical times, right? And from that time on, that this also includes temple times, etc. All the way up to the exile. Well, remember, we have two exiles. The first one was through the Babylonians, and the second one, the longer one, the one that we are still experiencing, was because of the Romans. But the concept of ger that we are going to study today applied to the Jewish people all the way up to the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians. So you need that information to understand what's going on here. You will see in a minute why, okay? So, when a ger dwells among you in your land, do not taunt him. The ger who dwells with you should be like a native among you, and you shall love him like yourself. For you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am Hashem, your God. Okay? So it's interesting. Even the translation, I always like to point this out, right? Because the translation starts with proselyte, and then it ends with aliens. Because proselyte usually is understood as convert, right? If you translate ger as convert in that entire paragraph, you will see that it doesn't make any sense, because it says, when a convert dwells among you in your land, do not taunt him. The convert who dwells with you shall be like a native among you, and you shall love him like yourself, for you were converts in the land of Egypt. Doesn't make any sense, because we never converted into the Egyptian religion. So the ger that is mentioned here in the Torah is somebody who was not born in the land of Israel. Is not talking about any kind of theological belief. It's a simple geographical relocation, and now is somebody who wants to stay in the land of Israel and adopt the local customs, the local traditions, and the local practices, things that we really didn't do in the land of Egypt. And that's why when we are talking in modern days about somebody who converted to Judaism, it's not that we just call it ger, we call it ger tzedek, to make a distinction between somebody who simply relocated to the land of Israel and somebody who back in the day relocated to the land of Israel but also adopted the theology and practices of the Jewish people. So Jerome Fomin, you said yes, stranger. That sometimes some other translations say you stranger, but it's somebody who was not born there and all of a sudden moved to the land of Israel. That's what you have to have it in mind. So why is this so important to understand? And let me bring my next text to clarify this and to answer that question. Because in the biblical era, the notion of a full religious conversion as we know it today did not exist, at least not yet. Joining the Israelite population meant following a specific set of communal practices without necessarily adopting Israelite ritual laws. So it was very difficult back then to establish the proper ritual and limits and implications of what we call in these days the conversion, right? Central to this process was the commitment to monotheism, the factor which most set pagans apart from Hebrew. Okay, those Gentiles who were members of Israelite society were known as Geirim, strangers or foreigners. And the Bible repeatedly emphasizes the obligation to welcome such people. So what you have to understand is people who moved to the land of Israel for different reasons, they knew nobody, they have no family. And it's not a coincidence in this context that it's mostly talking about male foreigners. You know, it says him. And I know sometimes the Torah it always uses the masculine, right? Especially because you have to understand that Hebrew is a binary language, so you need to be gender specific, and the Torah never says him or her, him or her, him or her. It just says him. But in this case, it was a big difference between a male ger and a female ger, because a female ger it will usually relocate to the land of Israel for the sake because it's marrying somebody there. Okay, so back then, by marriage, you automatically become Jewish. For a woman marrying a Jewish male will automatically in the land of Israel become Jewish, because you automatically start following all the practices, and you will have to share the beliefs of your husband. That was the way of society back then, right? That's why you will see repeatedly in the Bible that it will say, when we have all these very controversial verses to wipe out populations because of their beliefs. Most of the time, it will talk just about the men. Think about Pharaoh. When Pharaoh wanted to destroy the Jewish people, again, kill the males, because the females will marry Egyptians and they will automatically identified as Egyptians. So this is the same thing, okay? So basically, it's talking about males back in the day. Any questions so far? Any questions? Remember, the chat is open. You can use it to let me know any questions that you may have. And hopefully I will be able to answer. Hopefully I will. So, to make a point and to prove to you that this is the case, that there was no conversions outside of the land of Israel, I would like to bring to you one of the most famous episodes in the Bible talking about conversion. And that is the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth that we actually read on Shavuot. So, what happened in the book of Ruth? Well, we talk about Ruth the Moabite. Ruth was the daughter-in-law of Naomi and Elimelech. Okay, Naomi and Elimelech, there was a couple, they live in Israel, they were Jewish. It looks like it was a famine in the land of Israel, so they moved, they relocated to the land of Moab. Interesting. So now they are strangers, now they are Gerim in the land of Moab. Naomi and Elimelech, they have two children, 2 sons, and they married locals, right? Moabites. The name of one of the Moabites that they married was Ruth, and the other one was Orpah. Okay? Now, something happened, we don't know exactly what, maybe it was a war, we don't know, that Elimelech and his 2 sons died. So all the males of that family died. So all of a sudden, picture this, we're in Moab, and we have Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah all by themselves. Okay? So Naomi was in Moab. I guess she went there because her husband wanted to go there. And remember, that kind of society, you have nothing to say. You just go. But now she's a widow. And she says to her 2 daughters-in-law, I want to go back to Israel. I don't know anybody here. But the 2 of you, you are Moabites. Just stay here, remarried, be happy in your culture, with your people. Okay? So that's the context. That's the context that you need to understand before I present the next text, taken from the book of Ruth. It goes like this. Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, each of you go back to your mother's house. May Hashem show grace to you, as you did to those who died, and to me. So it basically said, may God repay for all the kindness and you give to my sons and to me. Okay? May Hashem grant you security in the home of a new husband. May God bless you so you can remarry. Then she kissed them, but they began weeping aloud. They said to her, nope, we want to return with you to your people. Aha! So now the 2 daughters-in-law said, no, we don't want to marry locals. We love you, Naomi. We want to go with you back to Israel. And we want to remarry there, okay? Naomi said, go back, my daughters. Why do you want to go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb who could become your husbands? Go back, my daughters. Go your way. For I am too old to have a husband. Even if I were to say I still have hope, even if I have a husband tonight and bore sons, will you wait for them until they grow up? Will you refuse to marry just for them? No, my daughters. On your behalf, I feel very bitter that the hand of Adonai has gone out against me. So this is what happened. They said, yeah, we want to go with you, Naomi, to Israel. And then Naomi is saying, why do you want to come to Israel? You don't know anybody there. Okay? Who would like to marry a Moabite in Israel? Oh, if I have another son, you could marry him, but I don't. And even if I can have a son tomorrow, where you want to wait another 18 years, so you can marry them. Nonsense, right? Well, again, they wept aloud. But, this is the interesting thing, Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth stuck with her. Naomi said, Look, your sister-in-law had gone back to her people and to her God. Go back after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, don't press me to leave you and stop following you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May Adonai bring terrible curses on me, and worse ones as well, if anything but death separates you and me. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So why is this so important? Different reasons. Number one, many rabbis read in this text the blueprint for modern conversions, in the sense that you can see here, and I marked it, that Naomi tried to reject her daughters-in-law 3 times. And those are the one bold. One here. Number 1, each of you go back to your mother's house. Number 2, go back, my daughters. Number 3, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her God. Go back after your sister-in-law. So 3 times. 3 times. Naomi said, don't become Jewish. Don't come to Israel. And then it was interesting, because if it was just the first time, Orpah was ready to go with her to Israel. But after the second rejection, Orpah said, okay, you're right. I should not go with you. And only Ruth stayed strong the 3 times. Okay? So that's why some rabbis seem to read that they are. But the other thing is, and this is the most, to me, it's even a way more interesting question, is Orpah and Ruth were already married to 2 Jewish men. So they didn't convert before the marriage to marry 2 Jewish boys? And the answer is no, because they were not in the land of Israel. They were in the land of Moab. And the conversion in the land of Moab made no sense. It didn't exist. It didn't exist, because if you live in the land of Moab, you basically follow the law of Moab. And back in the day, the constitution, let's put it that way, the constitution of a kingdom or a nation was some kind of religious law. So you move to a new place, you follow the law, and you will discover that the law that you are following is a religious law that applies for those people. Okay, so in other words, when Naomi, Elimelech, their sons, Orpah, Ruth, were living in Moab, they were living Moabite lives to a certain extent. I guess you didn't have to worship their gods. But it was clear here when Naomi said to Orpah, go back to your gods, that they still believe in some kind of Moabite deities. Okay, very interesting. So the answer is yeah, they were not, they never converted to Judaism to marry these 2 Jewish men. But now that Ruth wants to go back to Israel with Naomi, now she's adopting Judaism as a lifestyle, because the kingdom of Israel, in this case the kingdom of Judah, was ruled by Torah. That was the law. And then she went there and started to follow all those laws and those traditions. Plus, she made a pledge to adopt Jewish theology as her own theology. She became Jewish. No formality needed. You understand that? This is very interesting. And then you keep reading the book of Ruth. Eventually, Ruth married Boaz, who was another Jewish man from Israel. And again, it doesn't mention anywhere that she went to the mikvah and she had a Beit Din and somebody gave her a conversion certificate and so forth. Nothing, because it was not part of the culture. That's why this text from the book of Ruth is very, very, very interesting. So, when did things started to change into what we know today, that when somebody wants to convert to Judaism, they have to go through a formal process? Well, as I told you before, that was after the destruction of the temple. Any questions so far? Any questions? Any comments? I will make a break so you can type on your chat if you want to know anything about this. Okay, let's continue then. Let me read this first and then we can talk about it. After the destruction of the temple in 586 BCE and the subsequent exile, it was no longer possible to define Jewishness based on affiliation with a Jewish nation living in the land of Israel. Understand? Living amongst the Gentiles, bereft of territorial boundaries, Jews were forced to establish religious boundaries that would clearly distinguish them from their neighbors. A non-Jew would no longer become Jewish merely by assimilating into the Jewish community, which by then was dispersing rapidly. Instead, a non-Jew will have to undergo a formal religious conversion procedure in which his desire to become Jewish will be stated clearly and unequivocally. Only after successfully undergoing this procedure would he become a ger. Okay, but now the name ger takes a totally different context. Now ger means convert. And be accepted as a member of the Jewish religion and the Jewish community. So it's a few things that the new convert, they have to pledge. They have to pledge loyalty to the Jewish God, to the Jewish people, and to the Jewish land, which they didn't have back then, because this was created in exile, but they were already praying for a speedy return to the land. And that was the foundation of what we know today as a formal conversion to Judaism. So, of course, if this happened after the exile, especially during the times of the Jewish people in Babylonia, logic says that we should find some kind of trace in the Talmud that it was written in Babylonia. Well, that's exactly what happened. So if we go to the Talmud, you will see there the guideline that was very clear, the guideline that they were given by the rabbis to instruct future rabbis on how to proceed with somebody who was not born a Jew, now wanted to become Jewish. Okay, so let's go to the Talmud and let's read from there what's the procedure. Okay, what rabbis taught. A person who wishes to convert at this time, you see, this is what I love about the Talmud. Sometimes you have to be mindful of every word that is used there. So in this case, it said, a person who wishes to convert at this time. It implies that before was different. Because it was. All this mishigas was not necessary. All you have to do is go to Israel, assimilate to the culture. And that's something that's why I found it interesting that yesterday we celebrated Yom Ha'atzmaut, because now we have the same thing again. Now we have Israel again, and we have many people that they go to Israel and they become Israeli citizens, but they are not necessarily Jewish. And especially for some people, for example, that they are not halachically Jewish because maybe their father was Jewish, right? And they grew up in a Jewish home. But then when they wanted to go to Israel, they discover that they were not, quote unquote, real Jews because their mom wasn't Jewish, or maybe the mom was converted to Judaism by a non-Orthodox rabbi and so forth. So yeah, you can become a citizen, but you will never become a Jew unless you go through a formal process. But that's something that when we used to be in Israel before the big exile didn't exist. But now it's very difficult to bring it back. After so many years in the diaspora, and the concept of a formal process of conversion already in almost our DNA, for doing it for century after century. So it's a very interesting case. Okay, so let's go back to this. A rabbi taught a person who wishes to convert at this time is told, why do you want to convert? Okay, that is something it said, you're a rabbi, you are interviewing somebody. The first thing you have to ask is why? Why do you want to convert to Judaism? Don't you know that the people of Israel at this time are afflicted, pushed about, swept from place to place, and tossed about, and that tribulations come upon them? In other words, have you ever heard about anti-Semitism? Come on, why do you want to become a Jew? You're bringing a target to your back. It's funny, this was written 2,000 years ago. I can tell you that this was written yesterday, and all these things still apply, right? Because anti-Semitism is not a new phenomenon. It's coming all the way from back then. Fascinating. Fascinating sometimes when we read this, that it was written so long ago, and it looks like it was written yesterday. Okay, let's continue. We inform him of the punishments for not observing gleanings, forgotten sheaves, corner of the field, and tithe for the poor. And we further tell him the punishment for violating the mitzvot, the commandment. Okay. We say to him, be aware that up until now, you could eat forbidden animal fat without being liable for the penalty of karet, excision. You could profane Shabbat without incurring in the punishment of stoning. But from now on, if you eat forbidden fat, you are liable of excision. If you profane the Shabbat, you are liable for stoning. Just as we tell him the punishment for non-observance of the mitzvot, so too we describe the rewards for observing the mitzvot. So why is this so interesting? After you said, if you become a Jew, people will hate you because people hate Jews. Okay, number one. Number two, you said, I forgot to tell you before, but it's expensive to be Jewish. Because if you become a Jew, we Jews, we don't believe in charity. We give tzedakah. That means when you give charity, is if you want, you give. If you don't want, you don't give. But tzedakah means that you're obligated to give your money to others. How so? Oh, well, if you have a field, you have to observe the four commandments that apply to Jewish fields. Gleanings, forgotten sheaves, corner of the fields, and tithe for the poor. We're going to study that about in a minute. This is my next slide. Okay? So, but it was all about giving what you have to other people. And so it means if you become Jewish, now you have to open your wallet to help others. And it's a commandment. And if you don't fulfill the commandment, you're going to be punished by God for not doing it. Even more so, before or right now, you can eat whatever you want. You want to have a cheeseburger, go ahead and have it. There is no problem for us with non-Jewish people eating non-kosher food. They're okay. God is okay with that. But if you become a Jew, you have to start eating kosher. Right? And then, right now, you can do whatever you want on Shabbat. But once you become a Jew, if you violate Shabbat, according to the local law, the law of the land of Israel before destruction, you will be stoned to death. Are you sure you want to do that? Okay? But, the rabbi said, not everything is negative. I just also tell them about how wonderful it is to observe the mitzvot and how sweet the reward from God it is when we fulfill God's commandments. Okay? Next. We are neither too lengthy with the description nor too details. Okay, not too detailed. So in other words, this is the seed. This concept is the seed to what we call conversion classes or choosing Judaism, in the sense that even though we study for 25 weeks in Shaarei Zedek, I know for some people that looks like a lot, but if you think about everything that we have in Judaism, from the Torah, from the Talmud, the writings, the prophets, etc., Halakha, Shulchan Aruch, everything, 25 weeks is nothing. But it's coming from this text in the Talmud that it says, we are neither too lengthy, the description, nor too details. In other words, prepare something that is easy enough for the candidates to create a foundation so they can continue studying afterwards. Okay? So don't overwhelm them right now. They will have their entire life to keep studying if their foundation is solid. So focus on the foundation. Okay? Now, after that, after all that explanation, ask again, are you sure? I said, well, if he accepts, then he's immediately circumcised. When he heals, we immerse him immediately in the mikvah, right? While 2 scholars stand by him and inform him of some of the lighter and some of the weightier mitzvot. So again, a little reminder at the time of the mikvah, which is that's why at least it is very common in these days. And Sharia said we do the same thing. Right before we take the candidate to the mikvah, we have the Beit Din, and it's when we ask all these questions once again, and they have to say out loud their pledge of what they are committing themselves to do, etc. Right? And then it says, and this is the important thing, when he has completed the immersion, he is considered as a Jew in all respects. So you see, even the Talmud, it will say, once he comes out of the mikvah, the Talmud doesn't say, well, now he's a convert. It said, no, when the person comes out of the mikvah, he's a Jew. Okay? So if you are a Jew by choice, or what some people call a convert, don't accept other people calling you a convert. You're not a convert, you're a Jew. Okay? Sometimes we use the word in more, for technical purposes. But in real life, you're not a convert, you're a Jew. Okay? With reference to a woman, other women position her in the water up to the neck, while 2 scholars stand by from outside and inform her some of the lighter, some of the weightier mitzvot. In other words, it makes it clear that women don't have to be circumcised. I'm happy that the Talmud make it clear, and it says that a woman enters with the female candidate to the mikvah, because it's a prohibition for a Jewish man to look at another woman's naked body, woman that is not his wife. So that's why the attendant for the mikvah for a woman is another woman. Okay, and this is exactly the way we follow. And I will say, to a certain extent, doesn't really matter if you are Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox. Aspects of this text from Masechah Yevamot, from the Talmud, are present in their processes of conversion. Any questions? Any questions so far? I can't believe you guys don't have any questions about this. Okay. So I promised you before that I was going to teach you a little bit more what is this 4 mitzvot that we have to teach the conversion candidates. And you see, the 4 mitzvot that applied to the fields back then. We don't do it anymore because we are not farmers, at least not most of us. And even if you are, this applied technically only to the land of Israel, which is a shame. But it goes like this. The 4 are leket, gleanings. So the gleaning of the harvest, which must be left for the poor. So what it means is, and sometimes if you live in Manitoba, for example, in the summer, when you drive outside of the city, you will see the big sheaves of canola, for example, and that's a way the farmers will will create these circular sheaves, so they will be easier to transport from one place to another. But when they create that and when they move it, there is part of the grain that falls from the sheaf. It doesn't stay on that bundle, right? So everything that is falling as you move it, you are not allowed to go back and to pick it up. You have to leave it behind. So back in the day, there were poor people coming to Jewishly owned fields just to walk behind the farmers, picking up everything that it was falling from the sheaves. And that is called the leket. So basically, the rabbis say, well, you have to be sure that now you can't shoo away poor people following your farmers. They're allowed to do it because everything that falls down from your sheaves belongs to them. Next thing is the forgotten sheaf. Okay, sheaves forgotten when a field is reaped might be left for the poor. So you start moving all these sheaves, and then you realize, that you forgot to move the western side of your field, and then you go back to get it. No, you are not allowed to do it. You forgot to move it before. You have to leave it there for the poor. That is a specific commandment from the Torah, and a very interesting one, actually. Then it's the peah, the corner. So the produce of the corner of the field must be left for the poor. So in other words, the fields are usually subdivided in squares. So you have to leave the four corners of your field unreaped, and that so the poor people can go and take grain from there. So the question is, how much you have to leave for the poor? And then the Talmud also said this is one of the commandments that it has no limit. It's totally up to you. But the more you leave for the poor, the better. It's almost like the more you leave, you are impressing God. You are earning some mitzvah points by leaving more of that to the poor. Okay? And then the fourth one is the Ma'aser Ani, the poor man's tithe. A tenth of the crop if giving to the poor on the third and sixth cycle of the 7-year Shemitah cycle. So, and this is something that still exists. We count the cycle of 7, that is called the Shemitah. Okay? So every 7th year, you have to leave the land untouched. You cannot go and reap the land. So that is called the Shemitah. And so again, it's a 7-year cycle. You can go Google it and you will know exactly what year of the cycle we are now in the land of Israel. Okay? So what happened there is when you count this cycle of 7, on the third and sixth year of that cycle, you have to give 10% of everything that you reap. Or in other words, 10% of the harvest to the poor. And why that's so important? Because even in those 2 years, you have to give another 10% to the temple. So year 3 and year 6 were more expensive for the farmer. So in other words, the rabbi said, look, before you become a Jew, let me tell you in detail all the fine print of the contract that you are signing here. And it says that it's expensive to be Jewish, not just because you have to pay membership to the synagogue and you have to eat kosher, but because of everything that you have to give to the poor. And then remember, we are Jews. We count this cycle of 7, and in year number 3, year number 6, you have to give 10% twice. So it's not a 20%. It's you take everything you have, you take 10% and you give it to the temple, and then from everything that stay there, you take another 10%. But if you put the two together, it's not a 20%. It's less than that. But anyway, so that's the fourth thing that you have to inform. Okay? And the other thing that it came out there in the text of the Talmud is the fact that when a male wants to convert to Judaism, it's not just enough with studying and going to the mikvah, they also have to be circumcised. So the Talmud brings something very interesting. What it says, with respect to a convert who had been circumcised previously, what do you do? Right? Beit Shammai rule that we must cause a few drops of covenantal blood to flow from him, but Beit Hillel disagree. And this is interesting because this is one of the few times where Hillel lost the debate or the dispute with Shammai. Okay? Shammai said if somebody is already circumcised in advance, they have to go through a ritual that in these days we call it atafanda brit. So you have to take a drop of blood from the place where the foreskin used to be. There are no blessings, no nothing. They just say, I want to become Jewish, so you go to see the moel or a doctor with a rabbi who will witness, and the doctor will take a drop of blood and show the drop of blood in a piece of cotton and something like that to the rabbi, and the rabbi will say, that's the blood of the covenant. And that's it. and then the person is ready to go to the mikvah. And it's interesting because there are no blessings, and it seems to be unnecessary to do that. That's why Beit Hillel disagreed and said, guys, look, if the guy is already circumcised, you don't have to do anything. He's already circumcised. But Shammai said, nope, we need to take a drop of blood. And the Talmud doesn't really know why Shammai's words were accepted. But knowing the way the rabbi think, it was probably a way to, because somebody has to check if the person is circumcised or not. So you rather do it in the context of a ritual. Otherwise, it will be a little bit, what's the word? Embarrassing, right? Just drop your pants. I need to see if you're circumcised or not. No, we do it as a ritual, and at the same time, there is a drop of blood, which is what happened when you circumcise somebody, and then we say mazel tov because a ritual was performed. If you get the rabbi's manual from the conservative movement, some rabbis say that maybe you should, there is a blessing that they present at the time just to make it look more like a ritual and not just something that you extract a drop of blood. Okay, by the way, it's totally painless. It's done with one of these almost invisible needles that they are used for to test people with diabetes. So, and the doctors know how to do it. Yeah, it's usually a mohel who does it. Okay, so, but what is interesting here, and this is what I want to continue with another topic of this week's parsha, is that nowhere in the detail, in the guideline of the rabbis of what to do when somebody wants to convert to Judaism, nowhere it says that you have to teach them to be a good person. Have you noticed that? It says, if you eat treif, if you don't eat kosher, you're going to be punished. If you violate Shabbat, you're going to be punished, right? Which are, by the way, like ritual things. Or if you don't give money to the poor, okay, you're going to be punished. But nowhere it says, well, if you become Jew, you have to be a good person. And try to understand here why is that. But then I realized that we already studied this when I taught you about the counting of the Omer and how when we count the Omer before Shavuot, we meditate on act of kindness, on being a good person day after day for 50 days to prepare ourselves to be ready to receive the Torah. So in other words, being a good person, it's something that you don't need to be a Jew to be a good person. Being a good person is not something that is exclusive to Judaism. Of course, kashrut, observance of Shabbat, and all these very specific laws of tzedakah, those are specifically Jewish. But being a good person, I said, a rabbi doesn't have to tell you that. That's something that life should tell you. But nevertheless, the rabbis made it clear. And I will explain to you how. So there is another verse in this week's Parsha, also in Parshat Kedoshim, by the way. And it's one of the most famous verses in the Torah. It's in Leviticus 19:18. It said, "You shall not take vengeance, not bear a grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Hashem. I am God." You know this one, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Everybody knows that. It's one of the verses of the Torah. But then, so you have to understand. Hi, Liz Solomon. Welcome to the class. You have to understand that Rabbi Akiva already said in the Midrash that, and you shall love your friend as you love yourself. This is a fundamental principle of the Torah. So a very important thing to remember. Now, how is this connected? How is this concept connected to the concept of converting to Judaism? Well, Rabbi Akiva said this is a fundamental principle of the Torah, but now we should go back to Hillel and Shammai. Remember the ones who discuss about what to do with somebody who's already circumcised when they want to convert to Judaism? So let's go back to them. And there is a story that you may have heard already. And it's this one here. There is a story about a Gentile who came before Shammai and said to him, I will convert if you teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one foot. You know that one? Shammai pushed him away with the measuring stick that was in his hand. I guess he had a temper. The Gentile then went to Hillel, who helped him to convert. Hillel told him, whatever is hateful to you, do not do to your friend. This is the entire Torah. The rest is its explanation. Now go and study. So every time we read, whatever is hateful to you, do not do to your friend, that is the explanation. That is the way we apply, the way we observe the mitzvah, the commandment of love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, how do you observe the concept of love your neighbor as yourself? The words of Leviticus, very easy. Whatever is hateful to you, do not do it to your friend. And then you are fulfilling that mitzvah. So, in other words, now, when a candidate for conversion came to talk to Hillel, he didn't go and tell him about the forgotten sheaves and the tithing. And he said, wait, we want to understand the whole Judaism thing. First thing you have to understand is the core value of Judaism is love your neighbor as yourself. Then everything else that we do, all the mitzvot, 613 plus the rabbinic commandments, everything is to take that concept of love your neighbor as yourself to a higher level. So yeah, as a non-Jew, you can understand. Love your neighbor as yourself. You don't need to be a Jew to do that. But then when you go and study, because that's the part that everybody forgets about Hillel. When you go and study the rest of the Torah will help you. After you understand that principle, the Torah will help you to take your life and your spiritual life to a higher level. And this is something that it's also, I'm glad that the Talmud also bring in connection with the process of conversion to Judaism. That yes, it's important to understand all the mitzvot, all the commandments that they are exclusively Jewish, like kosher and Shabbat, etc., but also things that they are universal. They're universal. But Judaism can help you to take that universal principle to a different level. And that's why we prepare ourselves also before Shavuot. So on Shavuot, the revelation of the Torah can take ourselves to a different level. And this is interesting because I want to share with you this concept here, because this rabbi makes it even clearer. And he says, it seems that the Gentile was a righteous convert and was not acting in a sarcastic manner, jokingly suggesting that he be taught the entire Torah while literally standing on one foot. Rather, he must have requested a method by which he could base all of the Torah's commandment upon one unifying principle. So to speak, one foot, in order to avoid the lack of clarity that converts customarily experience, since they do not learn about mitzvot, about commandments, from their youth. Therefore, Hillel gave him a brief form of this all-encompassing principle with which he will be able to remember all of the mitzvot. In other words, if you become an observant Jew, if you start fulfilling God's word, you should always check and double check everything you do against the principle of love your neighbor. If whatever you're doing at the end of the day will make you not to love your neighbor, then you have to think again if whatever you're doing is actually Jewish or not. And that's why this is something that is, according to Hillel, is very important to teach to somebody who would like to join the Jewish people. Okay? And this is what I wanted to teach you today. And again, I said it at the beginning, some of you weren't here. My inspiration for today is because we just finished a new cycle of people who decided to adopt Judaism as their religion and they are ready to take the pledge to the God of Israel, the people of Israel, and the land of Israel. So it inspired me to prepare to present this class to you, because it's also mentioned in this week's Parsha. So I hope you have a better understanding now of why we have the process of conversion to Judaism that we have in these days and where it's coming from. Okay, so thank you everyone for participating in today's class. And if you missed any part of the class, don't worry. The class is going to be rebroadcasted tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time, and you can replay it. Or again, if you're a little bit of tech savvy, go to our YouTube channel. You will have the class there, and you can replay it as well. Remember, give us the thumbs up. Share this class with a friend. Subscribe to our channels, because we do things online all the time. And I hope you will have a great rest of your day. Please stay safe. And hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.